Just making sure my settings. Can't get it. Technical difficulties, please hold. Okay. Hello. My name is Noedia, and this is my first ever art video. Yay! So, who am I? Like I said, my name is Noedia, and I am a mildly neurodivergent person who likes to think of themselves as an ant. So do with that what you will. My favorite color is yellow. My favorite season is spring. I love bees, so that's definitely my favorite animal and my favorite insect, bug, whatever you want to call it. So why am I an ant? Especially if I love bees and I'm on the internet and I could be anything. Why did I choose to make myself an ant? And uh, the simple answer to that is because I just feel like I'm an ant. I sort of move slow. Difference between me and an ant is I'm not insanely strong for my size or anything, but I do work really hard even when it looks like I'm not getting much done. So maybe that's why. If I were an ant, I wouldn't be like a normal worker ant. I think I'd just be a drone who's pretending and trying to fit in. So yeah, I like drawing, obviously. I also like writing, even though I'm not particularly good at it. I like writing poetry and stories, but the main thing I like is writing essays. Why essays? I don't know. Just something seems right to me. I have a lot of different poetry, and if you watch any of my videos, you'll see that some of them start with pretty bad little one or two lines, and that's always just me messing around. I meant to prepare one for today, but I forgot and I ran out of time, so sorry about that. I like chess. I'm actually pretty good at chess, despite, well, being quite brain injured nowadays, which I'll talk about in a bit. And I'm learning Japanese on my own very slowly. I already said it, but you might notice that I'm a little slow or a little strange. And if you notice that, that's because a big part of who I am has to do with my brain injuries. Now, ever since I was actually pretty little, I've over the course of quite a few years, sustained a lot of different brain injuries. So it started off with um, a just like a hit to the head with a golf club, and then it only got better from there. So I'm not horrifically injured or anything like that, but it is enough to sort of give me trouble sometimes, or a lot of the time actually. I actually went to 4 full months of inpatient rehab for my brain injuries. So that's pretty cool. I haven't been learning art for very long. In fact, I only really decided I was gonna start drawing consistently when I went into 4 months inpatient rehab for my brain injury. And of course, at first, it was super frustrating because it turns out when you have a brain injury, it makes it pretty hard to learn new things. And also, my my hands were pretty shaky, which is another common side effect of getting hit in the head really hard or having your brain be physically damaged, depending. But even though it was a big struggle, I think learning to draw has been one of the best things that's ever happened to me when it comes to brain injury and just in general. I've found it's something I love. So, how is doing art actually helping heal my injured brain? Is the question, because that's the theme of today's video. Well, I guess we'll start out with a little story. So, growing up, I was always a monster at math. Ever since I was even really little, I was doing algebra. And when I first started public school in fifth grade, I was already able to do up to trigonometry type questions. But even when I was really good, I also was really slow. And so a lot of the time, doing the math I did took tons and tons of focus, uh, and sometimes longer than we had in class. But I really enjoyed doing it. I really loved it. After I got hit in the head, I found out pretty quickly that just doing math the way I used to wasn't something I could really do anymore in a good sort of way. And that was pretty devastating. It turns out getting hit in the head doesn't change who you are, it doesn't erase knowledge, but it makes just the little things in your brain that much harder to use. It's like, how should I describe it? It's sort of like using a computer. Maybe some of you can relate to this with a really old or maybe almost entirely dead battery, is how it felt like to me. So I was still able to do most of the things I could do before, but the big difference was, whereas before, I could maybe work on a problem, then move on to another and then another. After my brain injury, I could maybe work on one problem, maybe half a problem, and then I would just feel weirdly exhausted, not physically tired like I needed to sleep, but just completely empty. I would continue trying to think, knowing that I could do the same problems, that I knew how to do them, and that, in my estimation, it wasn't very difficult to do them. But whenever I would try, I would just hit a wall. Sometimes it was like a fog descended over my mind completely, and I couldn't think of anything. But a lot of the time, it was just a wall. I would know I could do it, I would know how to do it, but whenever I would try, I would just end up sitting there doing nothing, or I would just fail. And that was really discouraging for me. So, I couldn't do math like I did before. Actually, I ended up failing my semester at school pretty hard. So, what was I supposed to do when I felt like I couldn't do math anymore? Sort of my whole plans for my career were dashed, just because the more brain injuries I got, and I did get more than one, the harder it seemed and the less plausible it seemed to become that I'd ever be able to live an quote unquote ordinary life. Not that I ever wanted to be completely ordinary, but I think you get the picture. Well, it turns out I just had to accept it. There was no magic bullet. There was nothing I could do that would magically restore my mathematical abilities, which was pretty sad and pretty terrifying at the time. But of course, I didn't know it for certain at the time either. So instead, I just had to make do with what I could. I mean, I failed the semester and then I sort of was in limbo for a little while. And then eventually, my dad found this brain injury program, which was designed to help people who suffered concussions and brain injuries become rehabilitated in some ways. And so that was very excited for me because I thought, maybe maybe I could get some of my abilities back. So I went into this program very hopeful and optimistic, but it very quickly turned out to be very different from how I expected. For one, the therapies were mostly just things I felt like I could do at home, either talking about doing basic activities of life like showering and that sort of thing, which I didn't need help with, or just like working on a little bit of math or a little bit of schoolwork or anything like that that I could do on my own if I wanted to. And that was also really quite discouraging to me because not only was it a very expensive program, although I didn't have to pay for it directly, thankfully, it was a very time-consuming program. It was, like I said, 4 months in the end, and so it felt like I was doing nothing and getting nowhere, and I didn't like that feeling. So, pretty early on, I decided that since in the program it turned out I had a whole lot of downtime. In fact, I had more downtime just sitting in my medically appointed room in this house with a bunch of other brain injury patients. And I decided I'd try my best to do something useful with that time because it felt just like such a waste to be there and to have so much time than to be doing nothing at all, day after day after day. Just felt like there was no point in what I was doing. So I decided to learn art. It started out with somebody, if you're watching an art video, you may already be familiar with, named Mark Brunette, I think. You know, and he makes a lot of art tutorials and videos on how to learn art, both specific and broad strategies depending on the video. And I saw a video by him which framed learning art as almost like a video game where you have different skill trees you need to level up. And I thought that was very interesting. So, just like something I used to do for myself all the time, I decided I'd make a spreadsheet. Now, if you come to watch me very often, you will soon learn that I still to this day really love spreadsheets. So, I made a spreadsheet. It's called art leveling, and it's divided up into a bunch of different levels, each with different skills. And for each skill, I decided I was going to log exactly how much time I spent actively working on it. It started out with very basic things like observation and form, then moved into things like gesture drawing, perspective, then into construction, and so on. And to be quite honest with you, even though I made this now almost a year ago, I still haven't gotten very far with it. But I thought, even though I'm tired all the time, this is easy enough. I can spend a few minutes every day practicing observation. I would just look out my window at the buildings and at the street and at the people and practice breaking them down into shapes and thinking, how does that actually look? What's really that angle? And then, at the same time, I would try to draw simple things, just boxes, not even in perspective yet, and circles and that sort of thing. And I found that it was tiring. It was really tiring at first, but I had so much free time every day, and unlike all the other patients, I didn't have a TV in my room. So I would just spend whatever extra little bit of time I had um, working on art. And as you can see from what I'm drawing, uh, I never made tons of progress, but I did get a little bit better every single day. And moreover, I got a little more confident every single day. It just seemed like a simple little thing to me. I didn't think a ton of it. I didn't plan to um, use it to hack my brain or to become excellent at art. Good, because I'm not. But I did it just as an extra exercise for myself because I felt like otherwise I wasn't doing enough. And over time, I did start to improve. I found that before when I could only visualize things for a minute or two before getting wiped out, soon I was able to spend a big part of my day not thinking hard, but just thinking a little bit about my art and the things I was doing. And moreover, I found that not only was I getting more confident in my art and less tired, but unlike other areas, I seemed to actually be improving. And maybe that sounds silly, or like I've already said it, but it was a big deal to me because everywhere else it felt like I was just getting back to a baseline that I had lost, if that makes sense. There was no big sense of progress being made because I wasn't really making progress at all. I was just trying to find my way back to a place where I'd been comfortable before. And that was really difficult for me. But doing art made me realize, I can still learn. I can still do new things eventually. And it's not the end for me. I'm not, never going to get back to where I was before. But doesn't mean I still can't improve. And it doesn't mean that I'll just have to be destined to do everything I did before, but worse. And that was a big deal for me. And moving forward, I found it's the same with a lot of things. I found that this strategy of just working little bit by little bit, day by day, it's not what I used to do before. In the past, I felt like I really could learn things very quickly. And even if I couldn't learn quickly, I could learn well. And learning art made me realize that with this brain injury, it's not the end for me, but I do have to change my strategies. It's not going to be enough to just look at something, try to remember it, and rinse and repeat day in and day out because my brain's just fundamentally different now. But what I discovered is that that's okay. And learning to draw a little bit also made me, in going through this process and learning art and everything about that, also gave me really good insight into my identity. I found that I really put a lot of stock into my brain before I really started losing a lot of my abilities. I identified as being very intelligent, I think, and I put a lot of my value into how fast and how well I could learn arbitrary things. I had never really stopped to think about who I was going to be outside of who I already was. This whole process made me realize that I hadn't paid a lot of attention to myself or hadn't given myself any credit or stock outside of what I already was. Going through this whole process also started to make me realize that I hadn't really considered my identity, who I really was properly, in a long time. I'd always coasted by just being a smart person who was gonna go do smart things and be a success somewhere. Which sounds really naive and silly, and that's because it is, but that's how I had sort of thought of myself. Doing this, going through all these troubles made me really take a step back and look and ask myself, who am I and who do I want to be? I had already had a lot of considerations about sort of my identity in the past, but only in specific parts, not as a whole. I mean, you might be able to guess from the picture. Overall, even though it's a terrible thing that happened, In a lot of ways, it ended up having positive effects too. It turns out my biggest takeaway was that even with all my brain injuries and everything that went on and all that parts of myself that I lost, I didn't lose myself. When I had started this art journey, I thought everything was over for me. I just did it because there wasn't much else to do. But through it, I learned I could still learn, I could still grow, just in different ways. And no matter what happens, I'm still me. And yeah.